In this video, we will answer the question, is the United States still the most powerful country in the global economic arena? We will talk about what economists believe to be signs that China is destroying America. So stay tuned and watch this video till the end. The US economy has deteriorated and decreased since the global financial crisis, whereas China's GDP has soared. Most countries in the world consider China to be their main trade partner. It has risen to the top of global supply networks. It produces more commodities and automobiles than the United States, and it exports more technology. Every year, it even sends more goods to America than America exports to China. In fact, the US trade deficit with China has become the world's greatest trade deficit between the two countries. On top of that, China currently has more than $1 trillion in US government debt in its reserves, and the US loses hundreds of thousands of jobs to China every year. In other words, if the global economy was a game, America would be losing very badly, and China would have all the momentum. According to IMF calculations, the average purchasing power of Chinese consumers is 1.18 times higher than the purchasing power of US consumers. According to the IMF's purchasing power parity method by nation, China officially became the world's greatest producer in 2019. The Chinese economy generated $22.5 trillion, whereas the US economy generated only $20.5 trillion. China's maximum GDP growth rate since 1970 has been 19.3%. During the same time span, the United States' greatest GDP growth rate was 7.24%. For the first time in 8 years, the United States' GDP growth rate was negative. World Bank data shows that with each passing year, the Chinese GDP is getting closer to the US GDP. In 1960, China's gross domestic product was 13% of US GDP. By 2021, that number jumped to 73%, a five-fold increase. In 2001, the Chinese economy grew at an annual rate of 10% for a decade, while America's share of the world economy shrank to almost half, to 22% during that span. China has only had 4 years of negative growth. China is ahead of the United States in agriculture and industry, according to the World Factbook. The agriculture output of the United States is only 17.58% of China and 77.58% for the industry sector. China has replaced the US as the primary engine of global economic growth. Since the 2008 financial crisis, China accounts for 1/3 of all growth in the world's GDP. China's 4-decade-long miraculous economic development at 4 times the rate of the United States has reshaped the global economic order. Over the past 2 decades, China has overtaken the United States to become the manufacturing workshop of the world. China has surpassed the United States as the world's foremost trading partner. Over 80% of countries had a larger amount of trade with America than China in 2001, the year it joined the World Trade Organization. By 2018, the figure had dropped to 30%, with 2/3 of countries, or 128 out of 190, doing more business with China than with the US. Equally important, 90 countries traded more than twice as much with China as with America. China also established itself as the most critical piece in the world's crucial global supply chains over the last 20 years. China refines 60% of the world's lithium, 80% of the world's cobalt, and mines 60% of the world's graphite, according to the Department of Energy. These are the 3 core inputs to high-capacity batteries. Furthermore, China controls more than 90% of the global supply of rare earth elements. China has overtaken the United States as the world's largest exporter. China had exported $2.5 trillion of goods in 2020. The EU ranks second with $2.3 trillion in exports, while the US is third with $1.7 trillion. For the first time, China is the home to the greatest number of the world's most valuable corporations, according to Fortune's Global 500. It has also surpassed the United States as the most in-demand country for foreign investments. China exported $461 billion in goods to the United States in 2021. At the same time, US exports to China were only $106.5 billion, implying a $355 billion trade deficit between the two countries. China is on track to overtake the United States as the world's #1 economy by 2027, according to Goldman Sachs chief economist Jim O'Neill. In 2021, the United States spent $2.6 trillion on imported products, making it the world's largest importer. China is the world's third largest importer, with $2.1 trillion imported in 2018. China's global trade surplus in 2021 increased to $676.4 billion. Despite semiconductor shortages that disrupted manufacturing, exports increased 29.9% year over year, the greatest level ever for any country. China is the second largest foreign holder of US treasuries. The country buys US debt to support the value of the dollar. This is because China pegs its currency to the US dollar, but its role as America's largest banker gives it enormous leverage. China can devalue its currency when needed to keep its export prices competitive. And whenever the US pressures it to raise the won's value, China threatens to sell part of its treasury holdings, which would collapse the value of the dollar instead. In 1998, the United States had 25% of the global high-tech export market, while China had only 10%. China's high-tech exports were more than twice the size of the US high exports in 2021 at 29%. Only 12% of US technology exports were to other countries. Today, over 90% of all computers are manufactured in China. Since 2001, America has lost 34% of its high-tech manufacturing employment. China is the world's largest automotive manufacturer. In 2020, about 21 million cars and 4.36 million commercial vehicles were produced. Although it produced less than half as many cars as China, the United States is the world's second largest vehicle manufacturer. Over 2.5 million autos and 8.37 million commercial vehicles were produced annually. Since the turn of the century, the United States has lost 3.7 million manufacturing jobs to China. Manufacturing occupations accounted for more than 20% of all jobs in America in 2000. Manufacturing employment accounts for only 5% of all jobs in the United States. According to the Economic Policy Institute, the United States will lose 500,000 jobs to China this year. The middle class in the United States, on the other hand, has been shrinking at an alarming rate. The percentage of adults in middle-income households in the United States has declined from 61% in 1971 to 47% in 2021. According to the Pew Research Center's income band classification, China's middle class has been one of the world's fastest expanding, growing from 39.1 million people in 2000 to roughly 707 million in 2010. In 2020, nearly 50.8% of the population. This is a 667.9 million increase or 47.8 percentage point rise. China produced 16% of all goods consumed in the world in 2021. The United States only produced 12%. The US has been rapidly exporting high-tech jobs to other countries. Every year, Americans lose more jobs, businesses, and a larger portion of national income to China. Ever since China joined the World Trade Organization, it has become way too easy for big corporations to ship jobs to Chinese markets, where it's perfectly legal to pay workers extremely low wages. At the same time, the middle class in America is shrinking as the number of manufacturing employment falls. This implies that the number of Americans who rely on the government has been gradually rising. Unless systemic improvements are made, the United States will be plagued by structural underemployment and unemployment for decades. The US economy is going to take another hit, and the impending recession may provide China with the power it requires to eventually replace America in the global economic arena. I hope you learned something from today's video, and if you do, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you won't miss out. As always, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.